I love bringing to everyone's attention how important the mental aspect of mixing really is. For example, if you're in a type of mood where you're happy, it's going to sound different. If you're sad, it's going to sound different. If you just had an experience where somebody loved your mix, it's going to sound different, whatever you're listening to now. If you had a song that was a totally different genre, now you're listening to something that maybe less bass in it, it's going to sound different. Every time you listen to anything, it's going to sound different to you because of what's going on inside you, inside your head, inside the world at that moment, inside every bit of your day, and how well you slept and how much you ate. It's so interesting how it all plays in to having an effect on what you hear. I want to share this clip from Rick Beato's interview with Ed Roland from Collective Soul, where they discuss a really funny thing that happens a lot in the music industry, and it will apply to you too. So check this out, okay? This is fair use for teaching purposes, fair use for teaching purposes.
So we finished Heavy, and I sent it to the record label, and they call me and they go, the vocal's not loud enough. Can you put it up to 0.5? You know that whole story.
Yeah.
So I put the phone on hold and I said, Tom, do you think the vocal's too low? He goes, I mixed it. He goes, hang the phone up. I'll call Tom. I forgot who mastered it. Who was it? Can't remember. It was in New York. So he calls and he says,
Jensen maybe or
Ted
something?
Jensen.
Okay.
So Tom calls Ted and goes, send him the same damn thing. You know, they did it. 5 minutes later, they call back and they go, perfect. It's the same mix.
Oh my God, these are
Tom was great about that.
These are the classic stories that you hear.
Yeah, back in the day. That's whatever. Yeah.
Send them the same thing.
You know, and they put doubt into artists because we're already insecure. We're artists, so we're insecure. So when they go, it's not loud enough, I'm like, Tom. He goes, I mixed it. It's perfect. I was like, okay. Hang the phone up. I'm hanging. Calls Ted. It was. He goes. He even said, "Watch this." It's like, oh boy.
Send him the same thing.
Send him the same mix. Called back, said it's perfect.
You always hear the stories about the A&R guys. I know you would never really had A&R people show up at the studio, but the A&R guys would come to the studio and they'd be like, you'd have a fader for them. Yeah, here's a vocal, and then I think it needs to go up a little bit. They go up and push it up, and when it's actually not doing anything.
I used to do that when I was an engineer, and they were like, because you had it right, and I knew the room, like, you know, whether it's guitar loud or whatever, you do that fake move, like your hand slides over the fade, like, what's that like? That's it, that's it. Yeah, is that good?
Okay, so Ed, what's the where's the place that you go to listen to know if a mix is right?
I got speakers everywhere. Sean and I run all over the room. We don't do cars anymore.
Okay.
So that's pretty hilarious. Tom Lord-Alge is the person they're talking about when they say Tom, you know, because him and his brother Chris Lord-Alge mixed most of the stuff from this era that sounds amazing. It was all done by them. So what you got to know that's very interesting here is, as a mixer, having confidence in what you do is extremely important. And you check it on probably the better speakers than your clients will have. It's going to be much better. Most likely, your monitors are better if you do this professionally. Also, your room is probably treated. Also, you may have some software, some correction, you know, stuff like working in the room to make stuff better. You spent thousands of dollars and a lot of time, and may have even had it professionally measured, and you have bass traps all through it. You got sound treatment on you got diffusers. My point is this: you're the one that's super invested in the way you're hearing things, and you know what it's supposed to sound like. So when you send something to somebody and they have an issue with it, I'm always going to listen to what they have to say with an open mind. And if they want changes done, I'm always willing to make changes, but I'm making them from a perspective of hearing what it sounds like, knowing what they want me to do, and trying to satisfy us both, make them happy with their change and make me happy still with the final product. That's how I approach all revisions. When you look at something like this, when you hear Tom Lord-Alge talking about 0.5, the guy wanted it to be touched up 0.5. This is super common. I can't tell you, like, studios would, as a joke, when people would be bugging in the background, when a band would be sitting around giving comments to the mixing engineer that are, like, ridiculous. Can you make the guitar louder, guitar louder, guitar louder? And guess what? They're the guitarist. I've seen mixing engineers literally have a spare knob sitting around that they would just hand to the guy in the back and be like, here, turn it as much as you want. They just hand him a knob, not connected to anything. Very similar to what we got going on right here, which is, you know, what they're explaining about different ways that they would do stuff where he would pretend to move the faders and not do it, or Tom Lord-Alge would be like, what are you talking about? The mix is perfect, and you want me to change the vocal volume because, you know, this person at the record company thinks so, and then they would pretend to change it and send out the mix, and the guy would say it's perfect because people are in their own heads. They're obviously trusting you and hiring you, but yet they still want to maintain control of something. It's a very weird no man's land, and this is not to say that you can't make a mistake. Sure, that's why I said as long as you can discuss what is being done and what you don't like, then you could get to a point of common ground. But without the discussion, it's really impossible. So when you hear stuff like that, also, like I had a similar situation with somebody who loved the mix I sent, loved it, right? But they had an issue with one word. So I actually did a very similar thing here. I changed the one word and sent it back to them, but I changed nothing else. And then they said, oh man, you know, there's something about that other version. We're never going to be able to match that version, I think. Maybe we should just stick with that other version because, you know, like this is a little different. And I said, just so you know, it's the exact same mix, exactly to a T, and I listened to it on every speaker system I have and flip back and forth. They sounded exactly the same, nothing different, and I didn't touch anything, you know. But when he said that, I had to double check, but still I knew I didn't touch anything. I was just double checking to make sure craziness didn't happen, because sometimes that could happen. There's even a story that Andrew Sheps tells about how Rick Rubin was talking about in California when they were running through all analog gear. The power would change, and every once in a while, that would affect stuff because now the gear is not getting the same amount of power, so it's not going to sound the same. Makes sense. I hear you, you know, but if the power doesn't change and you're on a stable, you know, power grid where it's not doing that craziness, it's not going to do that. So, but the point is, that would happen to them, so I had to double check. But I realized it's not the same. And I told the guy, I was like, this is exactly the same mix. That's your head playing tricks on you. That's your mind psyching you out. It's the overthinking mind. It's the same mix that was perfect the first time you heard it. It just has that one word different. And now, you know, in 1 second of the song, but you think the whole mix is different. That's because your mood is different. That's because the weather is different. That's because the temperature in the room is different where you're at. It's so many things that have nothing to do with what it sounds like. On that first listen, when you've not heard it yet, with fresh ears, that's like the critical point when you should be judging things when you're listening. You shouldn't listen 100 times. You shouldn't listen, you know, you could listen once on a few different systems, but you shouldn't listen 1,000 times. You need to judge what you're hearing from a fresh perspective. As soon as you focus on anything, you will definitely beat that thing into the ground, and it will become a problem. And it won't, even if it wasn't, it will become a problem. So this is just another way to clearly express using this video that this is something that's been always going on and always happening, and it's the case because sometimes people just want to control things that are out of their control. Like how many people are going to like it, and if they just, you know, if they just make the vocal half of a dB louder, it'll be perfect. Like in this A&R guy talking to him or whatever, the record company talking to him, if they just make it half of a dB louder, now it'll sell. It was already perfect. All right. Just like your stuff. It's already perfect. So you guys got this. And this in no way means that when you're mixing, you should listen once. You're mixing, you mix as long as it takes to get it right. Just like Tom Lord-Alge probably mixed that song for a day or however long it took him to get it perfect. And once it was where he listened and had no problems with it, in his treated room with his setup that he spent so much time, way more than anybody who does this as a side gig. You understand? Way more. Once he got it right there, he knows it's right. Because that's also what it takes. A little confidence from you as a mixer towards whoever you're working with goes a long way. Like I said, I'll always listen to what they have to say. I'll take a list of comments, especially if it's well written with timestamps. I can clearly go through and hear what they're saying, and they may be right. Ad-libs too low, no problem, let's make them louder. What, you know, want the guitar to come up a little, no problem. Want the bass to come up, want the kick drum to come, whatever. You know what I'm saying? No problem. In this 1-2 words of the song, we need it to be a little louder. Okay, that may be true. Maybe there's 2 words that need to come up a smidge. okay. But I'll also venture to say this. It probably wouldn't ruin the whole experience for everyone else if that wasn't the case. But that doesn't mean we can't make those changes if given a concise list, an easy to follow concise list. You got me? That's what I'm saying. So anyway, throw a concise list of stuff that you found interesting about stuff like this, and anything, you know, that you've gone through similar situation-wise with fake fader moves and things like that. It's extremely common because we know how much it's up here. So you'll see people do stuff like that all the time because it's not worth ruining the balance over something because somebody in the room decides they need to control things. You know what I'm saying? It's also the reason for the fake knob. All right? I had somebody at a studio once, you know, talk about an aqua defibrillator. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, we just need to crank the aqua defibrillator a little bit and it'll be perfect. And I looked at him and I go, you kidding me? You punk. I knew he was messing with me. You know what I'm saying? I knew he was messing with me just because ain't no aqua defibrillator. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, you guys got this. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. You guys got this. Talk to you soon. Take it easy.